Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry for my view today, but I had a little technical issue with my computer. I hope you are doing well, and I do hope that now I'll let everyone join for a minute. So, hello, everyone. Okay, I can see some people already here. Again, I'm so sorry for this view that you can see because my computer had a little problem, so I'm using my phone. But I would like to welcome Emma today for our session. Emma Heyderman. Hello,
Hi.
Emma. Hello. Again, I'm
Hi.
so sorry for using the phone, but I'm sure that everyone has to hear from you anyway, not from me. So I'm lucky. I do hope that the session today will be interesting and fun, as Emma is always very cheerful and friendly. So I'm sure you will get an interesting session today. Welcome again to today's session on Macmillan Education Time. I just would like to remind you that to get the certificates, you'll have after the session, you'll have to check on the Mondadori section, Mondadori website section, which is in the attestati section. So we'll send you in the chat box as well some information, but just to remind you that you can get the certificates from the attestati section on the Mondadori website, Mondadori Education website. And if you have questions, we are here. So thank you very much, and I'll let you enjoy the session with Emma now.
Thank you very much, Romina. And hi, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here. And I can see a really active chat box. So please feel free, keep all your comments coming. Yeah, that's great. And I love all these good afternoons. I'm currently in the north of Spain and I'm just looking out the window and it's kind of grey and rainy. What's it like where you are? Where are you? Let us know. So some of you it's evening, some of you it's afternoon. Fantastic. So let's make a start. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. I think some of you might have met me before. My name is Emma and my heart is, in my heart, I'm a teacher. That's what I do. But I also write materials. I write materials for Macmillan. Recently, we worked on a new book called Upskill. I'm also a teacher trainer and a consultant for NILE Institute in Norwich, which I'll tell you a little more about at the very end of this session. Oh, so it's grey and rainy in Naples too. Lots of greyness. Well, let's make this sunny and warm. So I'm going to begin with a question. And this is the name of the talk. Why don't our students go home and study? What do you reckon? What are your thoughts? Please feel free to write your comments in the chat box. Why don't they just go home and study? Oh, I can see that somebody in Trentino, it's cloudy and cold. In the north, yes, I'm in the north too, it's greyish. And we've got some sunny, somebody, Angela says it's sunny where she is. But I'm also interested to know why our students don't go home and study. So I'll just let you carry on with that a little bit. And we'll carry on with the session. And we're going to start with an activity. So what you'll need is some paper. And when you've got your paper, turn it horizontally like this. And Barbara's saying they have a lot of distractions. That's right. No motivation we've got because I've got more exciting things to do. Brilliant. So in this session, we're going to see how many of these things we can address. But what I want you to do first is take your piece of paper and hold it horizontally. And what we're going to look at are some likes and dislikes. On your piece of paper, I want you to write numbers. So off we go. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we got some great answers coming in here. Laziness, lack of interest, social networks, families not present, too many devices, motivation. Fantastic. So we will be addressing some of these things. That's great. But in the meantime, on your piece of paper, you should have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I'm going to do next is a little bit of dictation. I'm going to say the beginning of a sentence and I want you to write it down. So number 1, I want you to write down, I'm good. I'm going to say it again. I'm good. And you're going to write that next to number 1. Number 2, you're going to write, I'm really interested. I'm really interested. Number 3 is very, very short, so listen carefully. Number 3 is I'm. That's an easy one. I'll say it again. Number 3, I'm. Number 4, I'm not a big fan. I'll say it again. I'm not a big fan. And number 5, the last one, I'm not very keen. That's the longest. It's 5 words, so I'll say it again. I'm not very keen. Brilliant. Would you like me to repeat any of them? Oh, I can repeat number 4. Yep, of course. I'm not a big fan. Number 4, I'm not a big fan. And fantastic. And at this point, if we were all in the same room, I'd put you in pairs and I'd ask you to compare. And I'd get you to say to each other, what have you put for number 1? And you'd answer, I've put. Would you like to check your answers? Here are your answers. How did you do? And then I'd check the pronunciation and I'd do something like this. Just listen. I'm good. Listen again. I'm good. Everybody repeat. Fantastic. Number 2. I'm really interested. Have a look at that word. Interested. But I say interested. Interested. Brilliant. And we'd go through the pronunciation of all of them. Okay, so you've got your 5 sentences, and now I want you to draw a line like this. Once you've drawn a line, get your finger and put your finger on your piece of paper. And then you're going to draw another line. I'm now going to take away my finger, and there's a space. What word is missing in the space? It's the same type of word. Is it a pronoun? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Fantastic. It's a preposition. So let's just check your prepositions. That's right. I'm good at. Number 2, I'm really interested. Fantastic. Number 3, and this is a little expression, into. Number 4, I'm not a big fan. Brilliant. Well done. Of. Amazing. And the last one, I'm not very keen. Brilliant. On. I can see that some of you are getting to the chat box very, very quickly, and others it's taking you a bit longer, which is slightly unfair. But there we go. There are your prepositions. Next, I'd ask the students to complete the sentences, but to complete them for them. And I want you to do this on your own. I don't want you to compare with your partner. I just want you to complete them on your own. So let me show you an example. For number 1, this is what I've put. I'm good at making people laugh. So just have a think. What would you put next to each one? How would you finish them? Can you think of something original? Okay, amazing. And obviously in the classroom, I would give my students time just to think about how they're going to finish the sentences. Okay, and then they finish the sentences And now there's a game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the end of one of my sentences, and you have to tell me the complete sentence. So if I say to you, making people laugh, my whole sentence is, I'm good at making people laugh. How do you know? Because you can see it on my screen. So this time I'm going to give you a different one. Listen carefully. I'm going to say, reading romances. Which one do you think it is? Reading romances. I'm going to help you a little bit, and I'm going to show you, look at my face, and I'm going to say the word again. Reading romances. That's interesting. Somebody thinks it might be I'm into. Somebody says number 4, I'm not a big fan of. Congratulations. That's right. Okay, and we'd go on with me, and then I'd put the students into groups and they would do the same. Here are my answers, and I would get the students to do the same. So one of them reads out the answer and the others have to say the complete sentence. So I would say technology, and the students have to say, I'm really interested in technology. And by the fact that they keep repeating the sentence means they're learning the preposition. Now, what we've got here is quite an interesting tool for the students to study. If we want them to study the prepositions, we could ask them to cover the middle column with their finger again. And they'd have to read, I'm good, making people laugh. And they could just lower their finger. I'm good at making people laugh. So they could test themselves like that. Or we could tell them to cover the first half and reconstruct the sentence. So what I've done now is created a little studying tool for my students. So here we go. This is one little exercise that your students can do when they go home and study. But what am I going to do today? Let's go on. We're going to look at 3 things, and you've mentioned some of the reasons why students don't go home and study. The first one, M, is for memory and learning. So we're just going to have a little look at the memory and how we can help them with their memory. But number P is important, and this is purpose, and a lot of you have mentioned this already, motivation. And the last one we're going to look at is agency. Now, it's all very well asking ourselves, why don't students go home and study? What you're probably looking at for is some ideas and some techniques. So let's change the question slightly, and hopefully you'll go home being able to answer this question. How can I empower my students to go home and study? What things can I give them so they do it? So let's have a look. Let's go on. And we're going to begin with memory and learning. I'm just going to give you a little introduction, and then we'll go on with some more ideas. So here we go. Here's a head. What can you see in the middle of the head? That's right. In the middle of our head is our brain, and that's what's doing all this memory and learning. Well done. Now, we've got a very little part in our brain, and this is called our working memory. And it's a very clever little part of our brain. And what it does is when we hear new things or when we see new things, it very conveniently puts the things into boxes. It puts them into little compartments so that we can make more sense of the world. But this little part of the brain is very, very small. And if we put in too many boxes in this little part, it gets full very quickly. So what we need to do is take some of these boxes and move them to somewhere bigger to keep to store all that information. Now, how are we going to get the information from the little bit of the brain to the big storage? Well, what we need is a route, a path, and we also need the transport so that we can get it from the working bit to the storage. And this is what learning is all about. Our students are receiving lots and lots of information. It's going into their working memory, but if we don't move it to our storage, it's going to disappear and they're not going to learn it. And what we need to do is make the little path in the middle, this little bit that's going backwards and forwards, as strong as we possibly can. So how do we make this path stronger? How can we help our students study? So think about what your students are doing. Think about how they study. What's a typical technique? How many of your students go home, sit at their desk, open their books and look? Then they close their books and they say, I've studied. So let's look at the techniques and the research. And this is what the techniques and the research say. They talk about things that are the least effective. Number one, they say highlighting is not effective. So if your students go home with a yellow pen, open the book and just underline everything in yellow, that's not going to help them very much. Number two, if they go home and they just read things again and again, that doesn't help much either. Something else some people do is they do mnemonics. This is giving things letters so that I can remember. So I want to remember the past tense of come, came, come, and maybe I'll remember ko, to remember that. Evidence says that's not a great way of learning either. And then what surprised me when I read the research is they say that summaries aren't a good technique either. So if our students go home, take their English book and just write new notes, that's not very effective. So what is effective? There are two things that are most effective. Number one is what they call retrieval. Retrieval is making that little path between the little working brain and the storage brain very, very strong. So this is a lot of practice in going into my brain, taking information and bringing it back again and using it. So this is very, very important that we do a lot of activities like this. And the second important thing is spacing. Now, what does spacing mean? Well, have a look at this graph. In America, they did a study and they had two classes. In one class, everything was as usual. There was a test next week and the students were told to go home and study. And the students went home and they studied. And this is the grey line. They went home and in the exam, they did quite well. But after 3 days, have a look at the light grey line, they only remembered a third. And after 24 days, they only remembered a very little. So what's the dark grey box? Students went home, but they went home on several weeks to study. And this was doing continuous revision with the teacher at home, And the study said by spacing everything, so doing a bit this week, then next week, then the week after, students are more likely to remember it. So that's memory and learning. But what does that mean in real terms? How can I help my students with this? Well, it's very easy. You just take the same exercise and you do it again and again and again. And there are fun ways of doing it. So obviously, this is from Upskill. And there are lots of pictures like this with the different buildings. This is one of buildings in the town, or there's another one with different types of people, etc., etc. So we've got the buildings in the town, and we might tell the students just to look at it, write in the names, and then we might get them into pairs. And we might say something like this. What's number 1? This would be A, and B says, it's a hospital. A would say, how do you spell it? And B would spell it, Hospital. And then they would change and they test each other again. Very, very simple dialogue. Another way we could do it is maths. So let's see if this works. So if you look at the hospital, what number is that? It's number 1. And if you look at the fountain, it's number 2. So we can do some very simple maths and we can say, what's hospital plus fountain? Hospital plus fountain. So you have number 1 plus number 2. 1, 2, 3. What's number 3? It's the picnic area. So we've got hospital plus fountain equals picnic area. Or we could make it more difficult and we could say, okay, what's the swimming pool divided by the picnic area? The swimming pool is number 15. The picnic area is number 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And what's number 5? That's the bridge. So swimming pool divided by the picnic area is the bridge. And again, the students could do this together. Another thing you could do is a memory game. Have a look at the numbers. How many of the numbers can you remember? You got 1 minute. Let's go. Okay. What was 0 again? Can you remember? What was number 4 again? Can you remember? And they can test each other by putting objects on the pictures, seeing how much they can remember. And again, what we're doing is we're making the root stronger and stronger between the working memory and their storage. Okay. The final activity that I might do in this picture, with this picture, is say to them, okay, homework tonight. Go home, and on your walk home, you have to take a photograph of 4 of these things. So they go home with their phones, they take their 4 photographs, and then they bring them back to class and they show them to their partner. And the partner has to say, what's this? It's the post office. And we're just bringing it more to life. And what we're doing is hoping that the students remember more and more of these words. And we're not asking them to study the night before the test. We do this class by class by class, using the material in the book. I've got 3 more ideas. In most course books, you have the review pages. And what a lot of teachers do is they use this page just before the test. But that's not going to work. I've already said that the evidence shows if we do all the revision the minute before the test, the students are not going to remember everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to do these exercises and we're going to space them. And we're going to ask the students not to write in the book so we can use the exercise again and again and again. So here are 3 of the exercises. This one, do you remember? This was the one we did at the very beginning, where I asked you to write the sentences, cover the preposition with your finger, and then complete it for you. And then we can come back another class and do this exercise. We can put it on the board and say, okay, who remembers these? Here's another exercise. And as you can see, this is to test the past simple. So again, as a class, we might complete it together. So we might begin with number 1, and I might ask for volunteers. So we got number 1, Tom played video games all afternoon. Number 2, I wrote a text message to Ben. Number 3, we listened to music in my bedroom. Number 4, they ate pizza for dinner. Number 5, my mum saw a strange insect in the garden. And number 6, when we arrived home, we did our homework. Can you remember the sentences? Let's see how good your memories are. And I'm just going to cover them. Number 1 was a sentence about the stadium. What was the sentence? And it began with Tom. Tom, stadium. Tom, stadium. Well done. Tom played, sorry, I got that one wrong. That was, number 1. Sorry, wasn't about Tom. It was the bus. I'm sorry. The bus, the stadium. The bus, the stadium. Well done. That was the bus stopped at the stadium. Number 2, can you remember that? That was about Tom and afternoon. Can you remember the sentence? Well done. Tom, all afternoon. And again, Tom played video games all afternoon. Well done. And I would continue like that, and I would give them a word and see how much they could remember. And they can do it in pairs. There is one more way you can do it, and you can see the sentences now. And what you can do is give them the sentences, but with mistakes. So for example, number 1, Tom all morning. What's the mistake? Tom all morning. And the students have to correct the sentence and give you the correct one. No, not all morning. Tom played video games all afternoon. And I can do the same with number 2. My sister. My sister. My sister. And again, the students would correct me. No, to your sister? No. I wrote a text message to my sister. So again, we're using a little bit of memory, a little bit, can you correct the mistakes? And you can get the students to do this in pairs and do the same exercise again and again. And finally, here's another exercise from the same page, and we've got questions and answers. So again, I would get the students to do it so they can match the question with the answer. And then I would cover the answers again and in pairs ask them, get each other to ask the questions. So, did you have a good time at the cinema? And I would ask the students to tell me the answer. Who did you go with? What film did you see? A horror film? Where did you sit? And how did you get home? And then they could practice in pairs. And then you can do the opposite. So they can see the answers and they've got to remember the questions. So again, the students remember the questions and they ask and answer the questions. Finally, I might change one of the words in the first question. So the first question is, did you have a good time? Did you have a good time at the cinema? Did you have a good time at the restaurant? And then we change the questions. Did you have a good time at the restaurant? Who did you go with? What did you eat? Spaghetti? Where did you sit? How did you get home? And we can keep changing it. Did you have a good time at the football match? And again, just get the students to repeat it again and again. And what we're doing is we're making that path between my working brain and my storage stronger and stronger. And that would be everything on memory and learning. But a lot of you said, my students don't go home to study because they have no motivation. And that's what we're going to look at now. Purpose why, and motivation. And I love this expression, which is, what's in it for me? Why do it? What's the purpose? I've got so many better things to do than go home and study. Well, we could try and make it more interesting for them. So we could say to them, well, why don't you study using your phone? You can do Kahoot. And for example, the new version of Upskill has several Kahoot games they can use. Maybe that way they'll learn and they'll be able to do it. And then there are other games. For example, we could use Quizlet or Quizzes or Genially or Wordwall. There are so many games out there. So we could do that. And they could do games with their phones. But I'm old-fashioned. And in many respects, I prefer things on paper. And I also enjoy the students working together and collaborating and looking at something physical. So why don't we give them a board game? So here's a board game. And again, it's taken from Upskill and it's a revision game. And the students would play in groups of 3 or 4, and they would land on the squares and they would answer the questions. Well, it's okay. And it's a game and the students can play together, but it's a lot of work for the teacher. If you don't have a game, where are you going to get a game from? So why don't we ask the students to make a game in groups for some other students? And we could do 2 things. We could do something like this. I found this on Canva and I just printed it very big and gave it to the students. In each square, I asked them to write a question. And if you don't have time or you don't want to print something like this, there's a much simpler way. What you do is you put the students into groups and you give them post-it notes. Each student has to write 3 questions on 3 post-it notes. If it's a group of 3, then they have 9 questions. And now they put their post-it notes on a big piece of paper. So they put all their questions on the paper. They draw a line from post-it to post-it. They write start and they write finish. And then maybe they add in some squares like miss a turn, jump 2 spaces, go back 6. So they make the game out of post-it notes, pens, and a big piece of paper. And it's very good revision. They'll be looking in their books, looking for questions. And when they finished, they give it to the next group. And the next group play the game. So each group passes their game to the next group. So they make a game and then they play a game. And it's quite collaborative. And again, more motivating perhaps than doing exercises. But let's go back to my question, WIIFM. What's in it for me? Why do it? What's the purpose? Because I know what's going to happen in the exam. Well, let's have a look at this exam question and why this might be quite frustrating for a student. Have a look at this exam question. It's a grammar question. Have a look at the instruction and have a look at the sentences. Does anybody have any comments? Do you think it's okay? Is there anything that you would do to make it better? What do you think of this exam question? And while you're thinking and writing comments, let me drink some water. Okay, so you've had a look at my exam question and you've read the title. Now, this is a true story. This happened to my daughter. My daughter, although I live in Spain, she obviously speaks very good English and she had an English exam at school. She had lots of other subjects to study, so she didn't do much studying for English, but she was confident. She did learn the vocabulary and she was confident she was going to do well. But she didn't. For this question, she got, yeah, as Loredana has said, it's a common exercise on the present continuous. You're right. So my daughter did this exercise. Thank you, Luthia. An example at the beginning. There's no example. So my daughter got into the exam. She read the question. She saw the sentences. She saw present. Can you imagine what she did? Her mark was 0. So here's her exam paper. Here we go. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. And there, yeah, an example at the beginning. Yeah, this is a typical gap fill. But look what my daughter did. And she got a 0. And she did the present simple. That's right. She didn't write the present continuous. And I said to her, but did you read the instruction? It says here present continuous. She said to me, I don't know what the present continuous is. What's the present continuous? And of course she doesn't, because she speaks very good English. She hadn't studied the present simple, the present continuous, the names. She knew when you talk about things that are happening now, you use the present continuous. But this exam paper had no example. And have a look at all the sentences. There's no context. It's just names and verbs. And this is where I'm talking about purpose. So our students think they've gone home to study, but when they do the exam, the question isn't good, and they do what my daughter did. They write the wrong tense, and the teacher gives them 0. And Sarah, my daughter, felt terrible. She had 0 out of 10 for this exam. So we've talked a little bit about memory and learning. We've also talked about purpose and motivation. And finally, let's look at agency. And you're probably thinking, agency? Well, this is agency. According to the OECD, this is what it's about. And I'll just give you 30 seconds to read that. So what we're saying is students are not passive. Student agency is allowing students to act, to shape, but make decisions, but with responsibility. And here's a graphical representation of it. So we're going to give the students some voice. We're also going to give them some choice, but we're going to ask them to take responsibility for these things that they're doing. And this is what agency is all about. So let's have a look and see how we can do this in the classroom. So with my students, next in about 3 weeks' time, we have a test. And the test is Unit 3 and Unit 4. And I'm not going to tell them what to study. I'm going to get them to find out themselves. So what I'm going to say to them is, I want you to study. The units are Unit 3 and Unit 4. But now in class, I want you to I want you to look back at the book and find out what vocabulary do you need to learn, what grammar, and what kind of writing am I going to ask you to do. So the students now go back to their books and they find out themselves. I'm not giving it to them. I'm asking them to work it out for themselves. And here goes. They go through the book and they find out the vocabulary, the grammar, and the writing. And the same for Unit 4. If you notice, on the right-hand side is a tick box. And what I would say to the students, which ones do you feel happy about now? If you're happy about it now, you can put a tick. If you think you need to do more work on something, then put a question mark. And if there's something that you think you want some help from me, from the teacher, put a big, big circle. and come and ask me about it and I'll help you. Now, the ones that you've put a question mark, you could go to the review unit and look at these exercises again. As the teacher, we've done the exercises already because I said we were going to space them and we've done them at different points. And now I'm going to give you the answers so you can go home and study. So you can decide, looking at this sheet, what is it you need extra work on? And you're going to use this to help yourself to see whether you know it or you don't know it. For the writing, what I do is I always give them the question before the exam. So I say to them, here is the question. So I allow them to read the question. And this is with my B1 class. And I also tell them how they can get a good mark. So I give them a checklist. So I talk about what kind of language I want them to use. So I want some past, I want some reported speech, I want some questions. I tell them what vocabulary I expect to see. And I also say, this time, what's your spelling? So I gave this to the students and they had 2 weeks to prepare this for the class. Then they came back into class. They had to put everything away. I didn't let them use their notes and they did the writing in class. Have a look at one of my students and what she did. So here's her writing. You can't read it. What you can see is my green pen. So you can see my ticks. I put a tick every time there was good language or vocabulary. I also put ticks at the checklist. But what's very interesting is what my student did. Can you see that she also, when she finished writing, she looked through her writing again and put a tick next to the things she had included. And I gave her 17 out of 20 because it was very, very good. So this is how I can help them and encourage them to take more responsibility, more agency. But up until now, I've told them what to do. Something else you could do is give them what we call a choice board. So in class, I'd like you to do some revision. You can revise on your own, or you can work in a group, and you can choose any of these things to do. If you have a better idea, have a look at the center, the one in the middle. It says free choice, but it also says check with the teacher first, because I don't want them to say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my book and start highlighting. I want them to come to me and say, what we're going to do is this. And if I'm not sure, I'm going to say to them, why are you doing this? So they can either choose one of my things or they can choose their own. But student agency is about choosing, having a voice, but also responsibility. So at the end of the class, I always ask them to reflect. How do you feel about your choices today? And it's very, very simple. They just put a smiley face. Pretty good, not bad, I made a bad choice. And for each one, I ask them why. If I have a very small group, I might get them at the end just to tell me. So when they're leaving the room, I would say, what face did you put? Why? And they can explain with me. But if you have a very big class, that's more difficult. So you can either get them to put it on a post-it and write underneath, and they can do that in Italian or Spanish or whatever language they don't have to do it in English. Or you could get them to tell each other and they can compare what they wrote and they can talk about their choices together. But if you ask them to reflect on their choices, always ask them why. So far, with this idea of agency, we've looked at ways we can give the students voice, choice, responsibility, but there's still a problem that some of you mentioned at the very beginning. I don't have time to study. You say to the students, why don't you go home and study? And they say, I don't have time. And then you speak to their families and you say, They say to me they don't have time, and the family says, of course they have time. They've got loads of time. I don't know. But maybe one of the problems is they don't know how to make time. So the final thing I do with my students, and I would probably do it now towards the end of the first term, is give them some techniques on how to manage time. And how I do it is I show them my own time planner. Now, at the moment, I'm working freelance. And what I do every Sunday night is I make a weekly planner. So you can see my planner. At the moment, what I begin with is I write everything that's fixed. So on Monday at 7:30, I always do a Zoom call with my family. On Tuesday at 7:30, I always go to Pilates. So the red is things I have to do. Friday, I can't do any work because I have to do something else. So I've crossed it out. I know I won't be working on Friday. Once I've done that, I put in my appointments. So today at 4 o'clock, I've got a webinar, and you can see some more appointments there. And then for the rest of the time, I start planning in what I'm going to do every day. So on Monday, I'm going to work on the workbook, Unit 6, and I'm going to do that much. I would probably specify a little bit more. So I might put page 1 and 2, grammar and vocabulary. So I would talk through to the students about how I plan my own week. And then I would ask them to do the same. So I would give them a weekly planner. I would begin by saying, okay, first of all, we're going to plan out the things you have to do. So you have to go to school. School starts at 8:30 and finishes at 2:30. So let's block that out. So we block that out. And then we talk about, so what things at school this week are very, very important. I forgot to mention when I would do this. I would do this on Friday for the next week. So on Friday, I would get them all to do their planner. They would block out the school day, and we'd also think, so what have you got next week? Thursday, maths test. Okay, put it on your calendar. Friday, you've got to present your science project. Okay, put it on your calendar. I'd also ask them to put in their appointments, things like 6 o'clock basketball. On Tuesday, they've got the guitar. On Wednesday, they've got more basketball. Once they've done that, and they've got the dentist, and they've got a meeting with their project group, I would then get them to decide, okay, but when you're going to study for the maths test and when you're going to do the science project. And I would get them to block out the time to decide when are they going to do it. And the other thing I do, once I've done all this on a Friday, is I put it on my desk. And then on Monday morning, I look at it again and check that it's going to be workable. And I don't add any more. I leave it like that. And then as I do things, I put a tick. So this is something I would do with my students. I would begin to show them how to block time, how to make time, so they can still do things like basketball and guitar. So we're coming towards the end. And at the beginning, my question to you was, why don't students go home and study? You talked about distractions. Well, possibly in their weekly planner, they could talk about the times they can be distracted. What time are you going to finish your day? Are you going to stop working at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock? Because at 7 o'clock, you can then do your distractions. You can go on social media, or you can play your video games, or you can do whatever. Some of you talked about motivation, and that's something we talked a little bit about. We talked about games, we talked about online apps, but we also talked about making the test fair, making it so they can actually do it. So we're winding up. The first thing I mentioned was this memory and learning, and the idea that things have to move from your working memory to your storage long-term memory. But it's only going to work if you make the road very, very strong. So we have to keep making that path. And that's through retrieval practice. So doing the same exercise lots and lots of different ways. We also talked about purpose and motivation. I wonder if anyone can see where I'm going with this. And the third thing we talked about was agency. And I've now made a word. And I said a better question was, how can I empower my students to go home and study? How can I do it? We're going to give them a map. We're going to show them the way. So I've come to the end. I've got a couple more slides. This first slide are references, further reading, and if you want to look at the research, I've got the online links so that you can look at the study on retrieval practice and spacing, and also look a little bit more into student agency. So this is on the slides. And finally, I have a slide from NILE that I'll just quickly show you. NILE run a lot of online courses, and at the very bottom, there's a special code for you. And if you use that code, you get 25% discount on all their courses. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing, and I wonder whether you have any questions, or whether Romina has any questions.
Hello everyone. I'm back. I'm sorry for the beginning, but I had a problem with my computer. But fortunately enough, we managed to solve it quite soon. So I'm back here. And it was amazing. Thank you, Emma. Really, really important. Very interesting, as someone is saying as well. And actually, the word map, I think, is really, really, really important. At the end, I was really it really struck my mind, because I used to do like that when I was preparing for Maturita some years ago. Now, I have to say, quite a long time ago, but I used to do that because it was the only way to prepare all the subjects together. So really, really useful, I have to say. I can see that everyone is saying very interesting, really useful. Oh, and Rosaria says that she did the same in classroom. So
that's great. That's great.
That's
great.
That's great, because it's I mean, it's really, really practical, in my opinion. And what do you think is the feeling of the students after doing that? Do you have any examples that, for example, come up to your mind from your students, directly from your students?
So when they actually create their own map?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the incredible thing is they say, so I don't have to give up basketball, and I can go to my guitar lesson next week. And I said, yes, you have to do that, because it's about balance. So if I do my science project on Monday and a bit of maths on afterwards, I can stop everything at 7:30. I can do a little bit of whatever, then we can have dinner, and I've still got time. And they suddenly realize, I do have time. And you say to them, I don't expect you to work 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours every day. The idea is to block your time. Just tell yourself, and they all say, so actually, I only need to work with my schoolwork for about an hour and a half. And I said, yeah, that's it. That's it. Exactly.
Yeah, and also maybe their confidence, motivation is kept up as well. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I felt the same. I still remember that moment of Maturita, and I have to say that it really works. So
I mean, the
practical
other
things always work.
exactly the other very important thing, and I think it must be an Italian word, the Pomodoro effect. Do you know the
Yes,
Pomodoro timer? Yep. So they suggest that you should only work for about 20-25 minutes, stop for 5 minutes, and then work for another 20-25 minutes. And you should work in hour blocks. So in fact, I've done that in the classroom. You know, if we're going to do maybe some writing, and I want them to write in the classroom, I might ask them to start writing, put on the timer and say, okay, stop everyone, 5 minutes, chill out, have a break, and now start again, just so that they can experience it.
Yeah, and it's also useful, for example, if you get distracted and then you go back to the topic, it's also a good way of checking if you still remember. So
absolutely.
that's absolutely. I totally agree. I can see lots of thank you. So I'm so happy to hear that and see that. I just would like to remind everyone, since at the beginning it wasn't possible because of my technical problem, that if you wish to have your certificates, you can go to mondadorieeducation.it/attestati. So in that section of attestati, you can then download your certificate. And for the ones who will have a look at the session afterwards, okay, I can see that there are more comments about inspiring ideas. The ones that will see the session afterwards will be able to get the certificates only if they register before midnight. So today before midnight. So thank you, everyone. I can see we still have 3 minutes, so let's just see if someone has any questions, last minute questions before saying goodbye, and then we'll wrap it up. I can see lots of thank you. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you everyone for being here today. We are really happy that you enjoy our sessions, because at the end of the day, this is what we need, right? Practical ideas to have to go on with all the sessions and lessons that we have in class.
We do have a good question here. How is it possible to see this video again?
All right. Yes. So this video will be, yes, exactly. This recording will be available on the Mondadori YouTube page. So whenever you feel like, you can go to the YouTube channel of Mondadori and you will find the recording again. All right.
That's great, and that's good. Good learning, isn't it, to go back and watch the recording again?
Yeah, exactly. It's
fantastic.
Repetition.
Exactly, repetition.
Exactly what you said at the beginning.
Exactly. Turn the sound off and see how much you remember.
Yeah, it always works. It works for everybody, not only for teenagers.
Yeah.
I do the same for work as well. So I repeat things all the time.
Yeah. And there were quite a lot of slides that people might want to take copies or make copies of. So
absolutely. And to be honest, the thing that you said at the beginning, the fact that you could repeat the exercise by changing a little bit.
Yes.
That one, I think, was a very good idea, because again, do you think the students feel more motivated if they recognize, let's say, the exercise?
I think so. I think they're motivated by success. So the first time they do it and it's tricky, but they do it again and it's easier. And then you do it again 3 weeks later and they're like, I've got everything right. I've done it. I've done that. You know, we do it as the class first, then we do it individually, and then we come back and we do it 3 weeks later and they go, oh, I got 95.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. We've come to the end. So thanks again. And again, if you want to download the certificates, it's mondadorieeducation.it/attestati. Thank you again, and see you next time. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.